is recovering from hospital. Honorable Patricia Jalil from Good, Honorable Tera Likota from COPE, Honorable, I don't want to use the other, you're sitting together, Honorable General of the Freedom Front and Honorable General of the UDM, and all leaders of political parties who are here this morning. I don't see the ATM, Honorable Zungula. I'm here. I also don't see the EFF. All right, thank you very much to you all. Allow me to recognize some of the prominent members of our civil society I've met here this morning. The Honorable and President Wamaloba, Honorable Khalima, thank you for joining us this morning. President Wamaloba. If you don't know what Maloba means, you go and check, you'll hear what Maloba means. As I was walking in, I met the former public protector, Honorable former public protector Tulima Donsela. You're welcome. I've met some members of the Chapter 9 and 10 institutions. Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, the Auditor General is here, honorable members. I don't know if you are aware of that, she's somewhere. And members from the IEC. Allow me to say, all protocol observed. Honorable leader of the ACDP, I don't see Ndate, so I'm recognizing you. Thank you. Honorable Tring. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, to you all, shall we start with the singing of our national anthem? May we all rise. I don't know if it is instrumental or if it is not. Honorable Didiza, may you lead us in the singing of the national anthem of the Republic of South Africa. You are here? Okay, thank you. Yes, proceed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. The Vice Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape is here with us. Please allow me to recognize you. Honorable Winde, I wasn't overlooking you. I had to start with your leaders who are here this morning. Now, allow me to invite members of the interfaith. Here we have Sheikh Alexander, Imam Masjid of the Masjid of Gatesville Mosque. We have Dr. Matole Mutsecha from the Kara Heritage Institute. We have the father from the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, Father Emmanuel, and then we have Sri Kitrikumar Pandya from the Hindu. If I got it wrong, my sincere apologies, from the Hindu faith. I have not heard, okay. Allow me to invite you. Thank you.
Honorable Deputy President, leaders of political parties, President Yamalova, and all delegates. I'm Professor Matole Mutsecha, Chairperson of the South African Interfaith Council and the Kara Heritage Institute, as it was said. I think our interfaith prayer for today is going to be somewhat different from the interfaith prayers of the past. And therefore, I will take 1 minute or two just to give you the context of this interfaith prayer. The founders of our democracy were deeply spiritual and religious leaders who recognized and acknowledged that cultural imperialism and religious separatism and intolerance were inimical to nation building and social cohesion, while recognizing that the proliferation of religious sects and movements are inimical to our democracy. Our founders sought to serve humanity, to use religion to serve humanity and which have much more to unite than to divide them. To advance the unity and common cause of all spiritual traditions, our founders founded the interfaith alternative as a vehicle for the realization of the national soul and its inherent ethical and moral values. What brings us together here today is to find a political common ground to build a socially cohesive and prosperous South Africa, which exists for no other reason than the creation of a better life for all its citizens, regardless of their race, class, gender, and creed. Our founders recognized, therefore, that a nation must have a soul, and that a soulless nation is not sustainable. It is for this reason that our icon Nelson Mandela was disappointed that the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP document in 1994 focused solely on political and economic issues and neglected the arts, culture, and heritage, which are the mainstay of the soul of a nation. To remedy the situation, President Mandela made a clarion call for the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP of the soul, which he defined as a spiritual transformation that is required for social and economic development. South Africa needs a new spiritual paradigm based on the interfaith alternative, This paradigm must be a building block for the South Africa we want. This means that faith-based organizations are one of the motive forces for nation building and social cohesion. To this end, Mandela founded the South African Interfaith Council, SAIC, to drive the RDP of the soul. Lastly, we are here to pray for the realization of the RDP of the soul and the political unity of purpose to build a socially cohesive South Africa that will be able to address the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. Last but not least, we are here to pray for government and to call on it to host a national interfaith dialogue on nation building and social cohesion for the development and adoption of a code of conduct for all political parties and persons in authority. And we will start our interfaith prayer by calling on our revered mother, Diana Farus, a poet, writer, storyteller, and a custodian of... Not yet. We will start by calling on Sheikh Abdurrahman Alexander from Gasville Mosque to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, friends. Dearly beloved, and all protocols observed, I greet you with the universal greetings of love, peace, and mercy, the greetings of the Holy Prophet Moses, the greetings of the Holy Prophet Jesus Christ, and the greetings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. Assalamu alaikum, shalom. May the peace and blessings of God Almighty shine upon this beautiful congregation here this morning. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. We pray to Almighty God, Almighty Allah, to bless this beautiful congregation, and we thank Almighty God for this noble initiative of the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments. I believe it is a positive step because at the moment our country is burning, and I don't know if you can't hear the screams and the cries of our mothers and our children in the impoverished areas, especially of our beloved Republic of South Africa, crying out for help, crying out to the government to reach out positively. And thus we pray to Almighty God, O Allah, grant wisdom to our leadership of this country. Grant them God-given guidance to fulfill the trust and responsibility that they have taken on to lead this beautiful nation. We appeal to God Almighty and we beseech Him to forgive us, to guide us, and to bless this beautiful country. And only with a unity like this, we can once again make South Africa the country of milk and honey. That country that was the leading country in the African continent. What happened to us? Let us come back to our senses. And I want to urge our beloved and honorable government to continue to engage with the religious leadership across the spectrum, the religious leaders of Judaism, of Christianity, of Hinduism, of Islam, get scriptural guidance to take us out of this abyss of darkness into the light of true civilization and guidance from Almighty God. I thank you. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us of the importance of interfaith initiative. I shall now call on Reverend Father Emmanuel, the Catholic chaplain, to pray for us.
All protocols observed. As I stand before you this morning, dear brothers and sisters, in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Spirit. For Jesus tells us in the Holy Book, in Matthew chapter 20, verse 18, that where two people or more are gathered in his name, he is always there among them. And so we gather here this morning, asking for the power of the Holy Spirit among us, as we give thanks to God for this initiative to think about good governance for our dear country. We thank you for the gift of each and every one present here, for bringing them here successfully to the commencement of this program. We ask you, Holy Spirit, to empower us, to strengthen us in all the discussions that will be going on here through these days, that you may help us to think about the betterment of our country. We also pray, O Lord, for all our leaders, that you may instill them with wisdom from above. Just like Solomon didn't ask for material things, but the wisdom to govern your people, we ask you, O Lord, to grant this divine wisdom to all our leaders, to think of the people, of the masses that you have given them. We also pray, O Lord, that you empower them in all their activities, so that at the end of the day, we may all come together to give glory, to give honor, to give adoration to your holy name, as we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Peace be with you.
Allow me to call on Priest Panja KG from the Radha Krishna Temple to pray for us.
भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात्। ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। Almighty Paramatma, lead us from darkness to light. Almighty Paramatma, lead us from untruth to truth. Almighty Paramatma, lead us from mortality to immortality. In Holy Scripture of Sanatan Dharma, Hindu Dharma, there are beautiful prayers for each and every single, not only human being, but each and every substance of whole universe, entire universe. And we are asking for the all kind of blessing for everyone, including this beautiful rainbow country, South Africa. Om samidhyu vase vrusadagne vishwanyarya a isvade samisye sano vasulyan savara. For nation, nicely, Rishi Muni is praying to God, may men of learning and wisdom take birth in our country. May there be born for the destruction of our enemies, fearless and heroic soldiers proficient in the art of war. May there be no shortage of cows, animals, and money, and also in our agricultural operations. May the householder procreate children who will become useful and civilized members of the community. May the women of our country be serviceable to all. May this land of ours be blessed with its seasonal rains, its natural fauna and flora, and may it yield in all kind of our subsistence. May this country of ours thrive and flourish, be productive and populated, and may all who live here progress and prosper. And last but not least, the root cause of the visible problem is there in invisible things and atmosphere. So also we pray to all 5 elements there may be peace, love, truth and compassion everywhere. Thank you very much. Pranam. Thank you.
Honorable Deputy President, allow me to call a member of the Jewish faith to come and pray, and the last prayer will be a poet, and then we can start with the business of the day. Jewish Board of Trustees,
Almighty God, Master of truth, infinite in justice and compassion, may you in your infinite kindness bestow your blessings upon this national dialogue on coalition governments. Today, many of those who have been entrusted with speaking for and leading the people of South Africa are gathered to explore and consider how, through mutual trust and cooperation, and in full-hearted unity of purpose, they can build and bring healing and prosperity to our nation. May the spirit in which these proceedings are conducted be that of reflection and respect, of together finding solutions, of firmly adhering to principles, yet able to make compromises where required for the greater well-being. May today not be a time of anger and recriminations, but of reaching out and listening and seeking and understanding. And in your wise guidance and infinite mercy, may we all, the people of South Africa, be infused with the wisdom and steadfast courage, ethical vision and inspiration to make the values of justice, charity and compassion a living reality in our country. Amen.
You are not. Thank you very much. Honorable President, Deputy President, we want to conclude this prayer session by saying that the interfaith leaders are grateful for your recognition that they are the custodian of the national soul and that you did not leave them behind. Lastly, Honorable Deputy President, the kings and queens are here and they appreciate your concern about them, and therefore the request is that this gathering, dialogue, must be a model for a dialogue, interfaith dialogue in September, and a king and queens dialogue in September, because we cannot build this nation without those two sectors. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ntate Matsekga. One silly mistake which I committed, and I want to apologize for that. I did not recognize you, Honorable Patricia de Lille, the leader of good. The only woman who's leading a political party, by the way. And that's why I'm saying it's a silly mistake on my side. The Honorable Sheikh Imam is also here from the NFP. I know that there are many, many political parties which are currently registered with the IEC. So I'm just recognizing those political parties which are currently represented in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. So if I don't recognize your political party, it is not out of respect, disrespect. Where's Jama-ah? Honorable Hendricks from Jama-ah, my sincere apologies. Thank you very much. We then proceed. Leaders are here. Africa, I recognize you, the Pan-African Miss Congress. I didn't see you because you were all lined up in front here. I'm really sorry. And the AIC, okay? Now, Honorable, allow me to proceed then with the business of today. Honorable Deputy President, I think, and traditional leadership which is here with us. Traditional leadership which is here with us. Now, allow me, Deputy President, and all members who are here today, all political parties, members of civil society, and all of us who are gathered here this morning on a very important business for our country. That DP, we hope that as a nation, we will indeed emerge here with a consensus on a framework that governs coalitions. Honorable members, my sense is that we are forced by circumstances to sit in this forum and discuss what is best for South Africa. We are a nation that has been striving to ensure there's unity in our country since 1994 to date, and now the most important is for us to ensure that we maintain the unity and cohesion, social cohesion of our people in South Africa. So we have a responsibility as these political parties, Deputy President, and civil society to continue to build our nation as South Africans. So, fellow South Africans, here is not a 2-day session for politicking. It is a 2-day session for us to find one another. Circumstances are pushing us, they are forcing us to sit in this form, in this manner, and engage with one another about a possible solution for South Africa. We're going into an election in 2024. 2024 is going to be critical for us that we keep the unity, whatever the outcome of the elections, whatever happens going forward, but our responsibility as society is to keep ourselves united. On that note, I want to recognize the presence of a veteran of the South African struggle. I didn't say African National Congress, I said South African struggle. And that is you, Comrade Mek Maharaji. I think it's important, you know, we are meeting at a university which was a site of struggle for the people of South Africa. UWC was a site of struggle for the people of South Africa. And that, therefore, I think it is proper, Honorable Deputy President, that we are gathered here in this manner at a place where Dala Omar has a center named after him, where the nucleus and the core of colleagues at the time would gather to discuss critical elements that should go into our constitution and the Bill of Rights as South African people. So I'm also honored that I have that opportunity to then preside in this first session. Thank you for the prayers, Ndate Matole. We now proceed to invite the Rector and Vice Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, Professor Tyrone Pretorius.
Thank you, Speaker. I have been asked to just explain the evacuation procedure. In the case of an emergency, there are 3 exits at the back, there are 2 exits in the middle, and there are 2 exits in the front. I know I sound like an air hostess. There will be no floor level lights to guide you to the exit. Instead, security will assist in pointing you to your nearest exits. You may take all your possessions with you. Honorable Deputy President Paul Mashatile, leaders of the various political parties, ministers in attendance, the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairman of the National Council of Provinces, former President Kgalema Motlanthe. This is your second time here, Kgalema. MECs, mayors, members of the diplomatic corps, members of political parties, members of the press, my colleagues, students, and all other guests. It is such an honor for me and for the University of the Western Cape to host this national dialogue. I believe that the choice of UWC as the host has been informed by the remarkable work that my colleagues in the Dalla Omar Institute has been doing and continue to do on local governance. Hope, the word hope, regularly raises its head in the recent months as life on all fronts continues to hurl burdensome boulders at everyone. Some people, in fact most of us, emphatically live with a hope that this country will turn the corner and overcome all of its hardships. There are those that have abandoned all hope of a better tomorrow. It is my wish that this national dialogue will serve to inspire even those that have given up all hope. Hope is a powerful emotion, a mighty tool that gives rise to greatness. Hope affects change, and hope sparks power. Now is not the time to give up on hope. If that was the case, this institution, the University of the Western Cape, would not be here today. Hope was the foundation that this very university was built on. The University of the Western Cape leaders and its community never gave up hope that someday this institution would be one of the catalysts that would unshackle our nation. UWC succeeded, but we are responsible for continuing to build this hard-earned democracy. It is fitting that we have come here today and to gather together at the Jakes Gerwel Hall. Under Professor Gerwel's leadership as the rector of UWC, a remarkable generation of professionals were educated. He started the Community Law Center and appointed Advocate Dalla Omar at the helm. It was here at this center, now called the Dalla Omar Institute, where the interim constitution of this country was drafted. Just as L.B. Sachs said, this place, this university, was the engine room of the intellectual foundations for the new constitution. UWC staff at the time included Bulelani Nguka, Zola Skweyiya, Bridget Mabandla, L.B. Sachs, and Kader Asmal, heavy legal weights. However, they did not allow their political allegiance to cloud their judgment on the importance of having a constitution that would protect every citizen of this country, irrespective of political affiliation. Today and tomorrow, you must evoke this spirit when we embark on a transformative national conversation to lay the foundation for a national framework for coalition governments. I shared with the Deputy President this morning my vivid recollection of the day that Professor Gerwel, at very short notice, convened Senate. Senate is the highest academic body within the institution. And Professor Gerwel's first words were, "Senate, you have to let me go." Given the leader that he was, there was consternation in Senate on that day. "Go where?" we asked. He said, "I have served UWC. It is now time to serve my nation." And that's when he became the first Director General in the office of the presidency. The Abdullah Omar Institute's history of thought leadership in local government spans more than 3 decades. This institute has consistently been teaching and writing about local government. It has made numerous contributions to the design and implementation of the current system and produced a vast network of alumni working in that sector. This institute we offer to this national dialogue. It is one of the institutes that can assist in finding answers to the challenges we face with coalition governments. We must firstly acknowledge the complexity of the problem, and we must understand that there are no straightforward solutions. It is, however, very clear that we should elevate discussions about party and political interests. We should elevate discussions above party and political interests. South Africa is a diverse nation. Our societies are complex. Providing a platform for all is therefore paramount. Every voice counts. Ladies and gentlemen, this might seem like an impossible task, focusing on coalitions. But we have a slogan at this institution, one that we live by. UWC is a place to grow from hope to action through knowledge. I hope together with the presidency, you will all join UWC on a journey for a better future. UWC played a pivotal role in establishing this democracy throughout the 80s and the 90s. Today we are proud to play a minor role as we look to revitalizing and strengthening our democracy. I wish all of you role players well as you embark on this historical national dialogue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. Thank you. Now allow me to once more recognize the presence of those I did not recognize. My apologies. My sincere apologies. There are many I've not recognized. But it's not out of disrespect, please. Now, allow me to invite the Premier of the Western Cape Province, Honorable Alan Winde, to make some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker, Program Director, Deputy President, ministers, party leaders, delegates that are gathered from civil society, from our international partners that I see here today, past President, past head of or lead as public protector in our country. Real leaders are gathered here on this platform today. My job is to welcome you to this beautiful and wonderful world-class university that the Prof has just told us about. Welcome to this beautiful province called the Western Cape and this amazing country of ours, South Africa. Molweni, wamkile, goeiemôre, baie welkom, good morning, and a very warm welcome to every one of you. I want to say that in welcoming us here today, I have one or two words that I want to leave with each and every one of you. The first being responsibility. And I'll say a few more words about that responsibility. The second is the urgency of now. Urgency. Or perhaps, Prof, as you said, hope to action. So urgency of action. Because this platform reminds me of those leaders gathered before us who produced this document, our Constitution. They gathered at the start of the formation of this great democracy of South Africa. This platform reminds me of those leaders that were gathered on behalf of our citizens at CODESA. And we are gathered here today at UWC in a dialogue that our responsibility is to make sure that that dialogue is remembered in 30 years' time. As we remember the start of our democracy 30 years ago, the formation of our great Constitution, that is the responsibility that rests on each and every one of us as we gather here today on behalf of every single South African who right now is looking at all of us to say we really need you to bring about the critical changes that are needed, to take us back to that day when our Rainbow Nation was born, when we think about the queues of citizens who exercised their right to vote for the first time in this great country of ours. And so I thought that I would start off just reading the preamble, just remembering the preamble of this great document, to set the scene for us as we deliberate over the next 2 days. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for the justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We, again I say we, therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen equally protected by the law. Improve the equality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikelele i-Afrika. This document is what we need to base our deliberations on. The dreams of those South Africans when our Rainbow Nation was born. Those people who the Prof spoke about from this great university, who played a role in the start of this great country's democracy. And as our religious leaders stood up here today, and I thought about what they were saying, about the pain that some of our citizens feel on a daily basis, about how many people in our country have not felt the change or seen the difference. We owe it to every single one of them to take that responsibility that each and every one of us have and have been given to us, to use that responsibility to make sure that this discussion is not just a dialogue, that this discussion and in dialogue turns into action, into urgent action. I serve the citizens of this province, and I know that so often our citizens come off second best when in the political sphere we play musical chairs. We find politicians who are thinking about office space, cars, and support instead of those very citizens who they were elected to serve. I can see it in the audit outcomes. I can see it in the way the funding is spent through budgets. I can see it in the way that governments are supposed to deliver but don't. And I can see it in the reports that we work with every single day, where we try to measure the difference of service delivery to our citizens. And especially in those places where the politics is played, the musical chairs or the talk of the day or the action of the day, and the citizens are left behind, things get worse, they don't get better. And that is why this platform is so very, very important. We also must make sure that we learn lessons from other parts of the world. And that's why it is really great to see our international colleagues, from ambassadors to consul generals, who are here. And I know that we are going to refer to things like minimum thresholds. We're going to refer to frameworks. And unfortunately, we must make sure that, or we must definitely make sure that we don't end up with saying, let's make sure that I am recognized as a person here in the position that I hold, as opposed to why I'm here on behalf of the citizens. So that when we form those minimum thresholds, they're not on behalf of my political party, but they're on behalf of the citizens of this country. That when we form those thresholds and those frameworks and those mechanisms that are going to guide us, just as the Constitution guides us in things that we do and decisions that we make, that when we form those frameworks at this platform over the next 2 days, that we do it with a citizen in mind every single time. That we do it with forward thinking to the lessons we've learned as a country in the last 30 years, the lessons that other countries have learned, that we've researched and looked at, and with that mind of saying, what are we deciding on today to make sure that in 30 years' time, someone is standing here or at some space in our country talking about 30 years ago, and us, we, that are gathered here on behalf of we the people, discussing a framework for coalitions, a framework for the future of government. But I want to leave one other message, and this message is something that I've thought about a lot in the last while. But it was reminded, or I was reminded, by our past president, Kgalema Motlanthe, and said it's not only about the politics, it's also got to be about the administration. Because we can't have political musical chairs played in the political realm of governments. We've also got to talk about how we create the stability and the professionalization in an administration process where at the same time it's not about the municipal managers and the director generals and the heads of department that are also being shuffled around all the time in musical chairs. Because when both sides are playing that game, the citizen suffers. the service delivery suffers. And so I have a huge honor to be here at the opening of this august and serious gathering of responsible people who are going to put their own egos aside and think about our own actions, our own dialogue, and make sure that this dialogue turns to a concrete framework, a concrete set of rules and a concrete framework that we will urgently put in place to make sure that the next 30 years of government in South Africa is one that gives the citizens the services, the dignity, the aspirations, and the environment that they deserve. We all have that responsibility today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the Premier of the Western Cape. Thank you. Now, allow me to once more recognize now the presence of our diplomatic corps. I see that there are also political analysts. I see divorce there. And I know that at the end by lunchtime, he'll be telling us what direction we seem to be taking. Now, at this point, I will now hand over to the Minister of Cooperative Governance, Honorable Thembi. And just to say thank you very much, you were a very good audience. Thank you.
Can you imagine receiving the robes from the Honorable Speaker herself? I must have been given timelines on how to do this. We meet here this morning with a hope, and we have shared our objectives with everybody else on the front page of our program. As I stand on the protocol that the Honorable Speaker has also observed. We hope that at the end of this, not today of course, beginning a process on how ultimately we may arrive towards a coalition framework that will guide and if necessary legislate. It may not be necessary that we legislate if we are able to converge in a room like this, all be able to put our thoughts, which ultimately could be recognized into how we would want as leaders to see the future of South Africa today and beyond. Let me also appreciate the presence of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leadership. The chairperson is here in the house, Kgoshi Seyatlolo, and the deputy chair, Nkosi Ulanga. It is very important that they also partake in such discussions. I'm therefore going to request Dr. Diana Ferras to bless us with a poem. Ikhosikazi sintweleke as a nation, sibonge bafana bafana, on behalf of Banyana Banyana. Siphinde sibonga ne-Proteas i-netball team on behalf of Bafana Bafana as well.
Honorable Deputy President Paul Mashatile, all protocol observed. It is a long walk to freedom, you said. The lime quarry is empty. Its dust dried your tears. You dug deep to build this road we now walk on. It was a long walk to freedom, you said. And we know now an even longer one to healing. But we bathe in the comfort of your words. We walk in its healing shade. It lies too neatly shaped for us to stumble over it. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together and in harmony and with equal opportunity. It was a hard road to dignity. From the floor of cell 4664 to the corridors of Parliament, yet you refuse to rest. For with freedom comes responsibility, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended. And here we are. You have gone. You are resting. But we dare not. We have learned so many lessons, and there are so many more to learn. We have different beliefs, come from different backgrounds, but we are all South Africans. We belong to each other. We should know each other's story, acknowledge each other. We are Africans. I owe my being to the Khoi and San, whose desolate souls haunt the great expanses of the beautiful Cape. They who fell victim to the most merciless genocide our native land has ever seen. They who were the first to lose their lives in the struggle to defend our freedom and independence. These words by President Thabo Mbeki in his speech, I Am an African, reiterate that we are blood ties. We built a nation many times broken, battered, but still bound to each other. The world is changing, and we must too. We need to find each other in a coalition where we can talk, cry with each other about what happens to our women, what happens to our children, but we also celebrate our progress. The month of August, we celebrate women, from Sarki Bartman to Oma Katrina, from Victoria Mklenge, a fearless lawyer, and Charlotte Makleke, the first woman graduate, to the Helens, Joseph and Suzman, Sissy Gould and Fatima Mir. And we want the upcoming and young to tread carefully, to know they have big shoes to fill. We have not heeded all your warnings, and so we have burnt our fingers. May we never not bow our heads in shame. We are accountable to the people of South Africa, a diverse, proud nation. It is indeed a long walk to freedom. And you said that a people cannot be free if its women are not free. In August every year, we remind ourselves of this. And though there are many that fail this call, August will come every year to force us to reflect and change. For women do the work on a local level. They hold communities together, and their places and positions in municipal councils and national and provincial governments should never be in doubt. Women have always been in coalition. We must attune our ears to hear them. It is in times like these that we miss your wisdom, your dignified walk, your genuine smile. Sometimes we just want to stop a little while to search the papers in your life's file. There are many who discarded your teachings, many who broke the promise they made to you, but there are many, many, and many more who still believe in what you stood for. It's a new journey that awaits. It is no straight road. We have hills to climb and dead ends to avoid. It is a long walk to freedom, you said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taina. That was beautiful. It is a time for us to receive our keynote address. This session, we dubbed it as South Africa, Here We Stand. For all of us to reflect that it is no longer about political parties, but it is about all of us as leaders of South Africa to champion the route that South Africa needs to take. Deputy President, you can't stand for much word on the long walk to freedom, but we are in the walk. Come carry us through into the walk. Hopefully, our destination will be what Madiba had wanted to see. May you all rise and receive the Deputy President.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Malbongwe. Facilitators of the National Dialogue, Honorable Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, and the Minister of COGTA, Honorable Thembi Nkadime. Let me also recognize other cabinet colleagues who are here with us, deputy ministers, Premier of the Western Cape, Honorable Ellen Winde, and other premiers who have joined us, leaders of political parties who are present here with us. I know that we have a lot of political parties here present and a lot of leaders, so I'm going to recognize you the way they do it in church. Honorable Musi Maimani, you'll know that. Bari kaditulo tsa bona ka o latelana ga tsona. That's the way, right? Yeah, sesiqedile ke umuntu ozothi ungibeke kuphi angibekanga kuphi. General ngezitulo zabo ngokulandelana kwazo. Thank you very much, leaders of political parties, for being here. Executive mayors, councillors from the Western Cape and other provinces who may be here with us. Let me also take this opportunity to recognize within our midst former President Kgalema Motlanthe, who has joined us, Honorable National Chairperson of the NCOP, Ntate Masondo. I don't know where he's sitting, but I know he's, oh yes, he decided to take a back seat. I think, honorable members, we should take this opportunity to convey our well wishes to Honorable Buthelezi, leader of the IFP, who's not well and in hospital. We send our well wishes for speedy recovery from this national dialogue. Let me recognize all members of parliament who have joined us, leaders of faith-based organizations who are with us today, the National House of Traditional Leaders, and all traditional leaders who have joined us this morning. Professor Pretorius, thank you for not having welcomed us, but also agreeing to be our host this weekend. We are indeed grateful to you. We are also grateful to the Dala Oma Institute for agreeing that they will be able to host us this morning. Amongst us program directors, we also have chairpersons of Chapter 9 institutions. We welcome all of you. Chapter 10, 11 institutions who are here with us, we welcome all of you. Organized labor, we are happy that you were able to join us as well. Members of the diplomatic corps who are with us this morning. Members of the media, and all ladies and gentlemen, all South Africans who will be watching this dialogue very closely this weekend. Dumelang kaofela sanbonani abshe. Program directors, I would like to take this opportunity this morning in this very cold Cape to welcome all of you to this national dialogue on coalition governments. Our gratitude once more goes to our host, the University of the Western Cape, and the Dala Oma Institute of Constitutional Law, Governance, and Human Rights. This is the first time ever that the leadership of as many sectors of our country have met to deliberate on a critical issue that has caught the imagination of the nation and will undoubtedly resonate beyond our borders. In reality, our deliberations over the next 2 days are several years late in that, like everything else, our democracy has been continuously evolving, though with little collective reflection amongst the broad sections of our country's leadership. Had we paused earlier to reflect on how best to promote and maintain consensus within our evolving democracy, we may have avoided some of the recent distressing scenes that have played out dramatically, particularly in some of our metropolitan municipalities. Our government is keenly aware of the challenge of addressing such continuous issues as coalition building. Universally, every political party obviously desires to win and to govern. However, when an election produces no outright winner, parties are forced to enter into such partnership as coalitions to facilitate the effective oversight and conduct of public affairs. Whatever the configuration of governance, the electorate and the people as a whole expect from those who govern nothing less than the improvement of their material lives, a better future for themselves and their children, as well as guarantees for peace and security. Those who govern also owe accountability to the people at all times. For without accountability, the process of governance is compromised. Additionally, where parties battle it out like the feuding houses of Verona, other things also get lost. Among them, improving the lives of the people is often compromised with negative impacts on the well-beings of citizens. This is all the more so in a country like South Africa, which has for the longest time been the subject of international attention. This is accentuated by the age of social media, in which ordinary citizens can be as powerful communicators as any of the global news television agencies. Within minutes, a clip about some injudicious or downright ill-conceived incidents, whether in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, or any small town or village in our country, can reach a significant number of the world's 6.9 billion people on their smartphones and inform perceptions about South Africa across the globe. These impressions invariably affect the choices and judgments, big or small, public or private, that others make about us. In short, our audience is no longer just our fellow citizens or fellow nationals. We sit in a global fishbowl. Yet our political focus must unerringly remain on the well-being of our people. Our pursuit of national consensus on how to approach coalition government is a matter of national interest. Properly handled, it has the potential to bring the necessary stability, especially to the local government sphere, despite the intemperance we have witnessed in relation to coalitions. So program directors, these dialogues therefore seek to promote fidelity to the national interest so that we remain focused on the fulfillment of our constitutional injunction, which is to build a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. You will have seen our discussion paper, ladies and gentlemen, which is entitled A Policy Framework Towards Stable Governance. It makes the important point that, and I quote, coalitions are an unmistakable expression of choices that the electorate has made. It is democracy at work, close quote. But the paper also went on to recognize and identifies some problems and challenges, particularly in the local sphere of government. Amongst them, it says lack of skills, inadequate revenue, indifference from both administrators and politicians, and the substitution of the public good with self-interest. The document also makes an important point whose nuances must be kept in mind throughout our discussions this weekend. Whereas it asserts a direct correlation between the constant collapse of municipalities or municipal executives and them being coalition governments, it also cautions that the correlation does not imply causality. That is, coalitions can trigger collapses in that both the coalitions and their turbulences have separate triggers, albeit some of them interrelated. However, ladies and gentlemen, the frequent collapse of coalitions that were witnessed at local government level sometimes is deliberate sometimes even unrelated to the pursuit of the public good, and can be minimized down to a healthy level with little detrimental effect on municipal administrations. Other distressing problems the document identified with our recent coalition experience at local government level, and particularly the country's major metropolitan municipalities, include the following: opportunistic behavior, or this sometimes is enabled by institutional loopholes, the lack of a threshold for the admissibility of a motion of no confidence, and the vulgarization and procedurization of the process that are not related to considerations of ethics or competence, the monetization of votes and seats in municipal governance, patronage, rent-seeking, etc., but also power play and relevance, ganging up against incumbents. These are the challenges we need to address. Our document therefore says, amongst others, career politicians without any prospects of employment elsewhere face a constant risk of job insecurity. This is no minor matter. It is closely related to a broader socio-logical characteristic of the South African society, which manifests the continued racial imbalance in the distribution of opportunities, particularly wealth, but poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Fellow delegates, it is also exacerbated by an economy that has not grown sufficiently over the years to absorb greater numbers of job seekers. So together, both factors, the socio-logical characteristics of our society and the stagnant economy, manifested in a stampede towards the political sphere, especially by young people or the youth, who increasingly demand greater representation in politics than the professions in the rise in variance of right-wing and left-wing populism alike. In fairness, populism is not only a South African problem, but a global phenomenon that cannot be understood outside of the context of national and international resource distribution imbalances. Program directors, like any other country, our sociological reality impacts the state of political parties in the country. It reflects the political party's social base and the extent to which, as creatures of agency, every social base exerts itself on the national stage in a dynamic intercourse with others to produce particular outcomes. Consequently, whilst we must be ready and willing to learn from other coalition experiences in other countries, we must also bear in mind that South Africa's unique sociological and political characteristics are different from other countries. Our history of a unique colonialism that is unlike any other, and the enduring legacy of that special colonialism has a direct impact on our politics today, and will undoubtedly be the case for a long time to come. We must therefore craft viable partnerships that reflect the South African context in all its nuances, complexities, and also opportunities. A few days ago, I read a book about the destruction of Somalia, written by one of the country's former diplomats, His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Osman Omar. The thrust of his thesis is that after the collapse of the Siad Barre regime in January 1991, Somalia descended into a civil war and eventually collapsed because the leadership was driven by what he calls power struggle without restraint. Emphasizing the point, he argues that they were inspired, and I quote, by self-aggrandizement, absence of discipline, and national spirit. They pursued Somalia's narrow social cleavages based on clan loyalties, never willing to learn, as he said, from our own and from other people's follies, close quote. Ambassador Omar's observation about his country begs several questions. Perhaps the most crucial is what must be done to institutionalize fidelity to the national interest, a challenge that is as Somalians as it is South Africans, more so in view of the alarm bells sounded in the document we have distributed, which notes the substitution of the public good with self-interest, and also the frequent collapse of coalitions at local government level, which, as we have observed in some instances, it is deliberate and unrelated to the pursuit of public good. So many in some of these institutions, as they collapse this institution, or as they seek to do and arrange their coalitions, it's not about the people. It's about themselves and what they can achieve, what they can benefit. So, ladies and gentlemen, we in this dialogue today must be able to address these challenges, because we know that implicit in this is the nature and character of the South African political parties and their national political culture that must take into account the challenge that we have raised in this discussion document that you'll all go through. But perhaps to be able to hammer the point home, let me briefly observe what Ben Oki said, because I think this will serve us even better as we get into this dialogue. And he said, we dream of a new politics that will renew the world. Under their wary, suspicious gaze, there's always a new way, a better way that's not been tried before. Close quote. This is crucial because the membership and support base of political parties are dreamers in as much as they are carriers of political outlooks, messages which in their turn shape the nation's political thinking, ways of seeing and doing politics with profound implications for its future prospects. Program directors, I'm suggesting that our social structure and its economics are central to all our endeavors, with or without coalitions in any sphere of our government, but most especially because of coalitions, South Africa requires a growing economy which creates opportunities for the people beyond the political sphere. As an ending dividend of freedom, such an economy will be a factor in social and political stability, state and nation building, all of which can elude us if the economy fails. We must salute the work done by a number of institutions, some of them are here this morning, on how to improve and stabilize coalition governments, particularly at the local level. The government has contributed some proposals in this regard and are covered in our framework document. One of them, first one, commitment to a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society. Coalition government based on the actual votes received by each party. Commitment to Batupele principles, putting people first. Working towards poverty eradication through a growing and inclusive economy. And also, last but not least, good governance and zero tolerance for corruption. Program directors, this is an open process in which everyone is free to make proposals. We intend to synthesize proposals from as many South Africans as possible and to present these in the coming months as a framework for consideration which may end up in legislation. In many respects, we are fortunate that we may be the generation in our evolving democracy that co-creates and designs resilient solutions to our political architecture. Coalitions must therefore give us the possibility to consolidate national efforts to create a truly substantive democracy that is based on the will of the people. To underscore the urgency in which we should respond to this moment of our democracy, let us recall the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, "There are millions of poor people in this country who have little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life." Close quote. Although this was directed at the America of the time, of his time, it carries equal meaning for us. We can ignite the hopes of our people with a demonstration of united leadership, which communicates the message that we have gathered here today as a collective of South African statesmen and women, and not as mere politicians representing our parties. I therefore invite the collective wisdom of all those who led us previously in the making of this country that has been acknowledged amongst others by the VC this morning. Those who were weaving it together as a proud nation of all who live in it, united in their diversity, as we say in our Constitution. I'm talking here about our liberation ancestors who initiated and successfully delivered a democratic South Africa. May they come forward and bless us as we undertake similar steps that requires the nation to pause in attention and reaffirm its commitment to move forward in concert towards the attainment of a non-racial, democratic, non-sexist, and prosperous South African nation. This national dialogue will not stop after tomorrow. It is just the beginning. It is the launch of the dialogue that must spread across our nation as we collectively grapple with the most crucial question: What do we do going forward to serve our people better? The motto of this eminent institution, this University of Higher Learning, is Respise, Prospise. Look back, look forward, and take what is worthy from the past and build the future. As we grapple with these issues, program directors, may we embrace the opposite counsel of the motto of the University of the Western Cape, so that we are able to meet the expectations of the people for material improvement of their lives and secure a better future for them and their children. So shall we be true to the national interest. I'm delighted to end with some good news this morning. His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has appointed Professor Thuli Madonsela, our former public protector, to serve as his newly formed Scientific Advisory Board. This advisory board is to advise on emerging scientific issues so as to maximize scientific advances for the global good. Congratulations, Prof. Siyakhalalisela. Okay. Thank you, Minister, for correcting me. Honorable Program Directors, let me conclude. And I want to say to Professor Madonsela, you have done our country proud. We are confident that you will fly the national flag even higher. Your appointment illustrates the fact that we are a nation that has everything it takes to rise to greater heights. Well done. I want to therefore finally conclude with the wise words of the founding father of our democratic nation, Utata Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, when he said the following: "It may seem impossible until it is done." Honorable delegates, we can do it. Let's continue to build this great nation together. Thank you very much, and I wish you a successful dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. I made it my mission, having been troubled in Limpopo for not knowing Sotho, that any person who comes from there who attempt ukukhuluma isiSwati sasekhaya and mess, nami ndizomhleka. Siyabahalalisela. Yeah. They used to say to me, Chabampia, and I wouldn't know they are saying, run away from the dog. So that's the revenge. Thank you very much, Deputy President. We shall do so. We are about to conclude and wrap our Part B, or rather Part A, and move to Part B session. But we wouldn't do that without welcoming the University of Western Cape Quartet. I'm sure they have got a beautiful rendition for us. But for a seamless move in, I will no longer come back here into the podium. After the quartet, I'm going to request the director for the Center for Social Justice at the University of Stellenbosch and the newly appointed United Nations member of the Scientific Advisory Board, Professor Thulisile Nomkhosi Madonsela, together with one of our business leaders, Mr. Bobby Gottsell, to be the facilitators of Part B, and they take us through a session where we aspire to build a united and a democratic South Africa. Immediately after the quartet says Thuli, you come to the fore for facilitation. Thank you very much. So far, so good.
Night, it's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear your whisper underneath your breath. Ooh, I feel your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear your whisper underneath your breath. Ooh, I feel your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you. stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, I won't let your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Hide away, they say, no one will love you as you are. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna say I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out, here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apology. This is me, another round of bullets hits my skin. Well, fire away, 'cause today I won't let the shame sink in. We are bursting through the barricades, reaching for the stars. We are warriors, and that's what we've become. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood to drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apology. This is me, this is me. And I know that I deserve love. That's something that I'm way beyond. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood and drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apology. This is me. This is me.
Honorable Program Facilitators, Speaker Mapisa Ngagula, and Minister of COGTA, Thembi Nkadimeng. His Excellency, the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, His Excellency, the Premier of the Western Cape, Premier Alwyn Wende, esteemed Excellencies, leaders of government, leaders of political parties, the diplomatic community, the media, colleagues, and community members. Greetings. Congratulations, Deputy President and the Presidency and the University of the Western Cape for hosting this timely event, and thank you for involving me. And DP, thank you also for those kind remarks. We meet in a climate of dysphoria. We are painfully watching our democracy descend into a dystopia. A key factor in our winter of discontent is the dysfunctionality of government, particularly at the coalface of governance and service delivery, being local government. This is what we've been told in the concept document. This is what we've been told in the speeches that have been presented to us, particularly the extensive speech by the Deputy President. The concept document opines that a key factor in local government dysfunctionality are unstable coalitions. The party submissions we are about to listen to confirm that unstable coalitions are indeed impacting negatively on governance and service delivery in our municipalities. The paper proposes several changes to the framework for coalitions. Key among those proposals being 6 principles to regulate the relationships and functioning of these coalition governments. It also proposes legal regulation. This platform right now, or this session right now, is a platform for political parties to provide us with their responses to the proposed framework and perspectives on factors of dysfunctionality, or rather factors behind the dysfunctionality of coalitions, together with their proposals for modifications. The solutions, of course, are informed by 2 things. Number 1 is, how do parties see the drivers of the problem? Secondly, what do they consider to be the non-negotiable guardrails for our democracy? I thought I would just take a minute to explain what I consider to be the guardrails as fundamental. Of course, it's the Constitution, as we've heard from the Premier, the DP, and others. We have an unusual Constitution that really provides a very clear framework of the society we're establishing. Charles Colson specifies in S versus Makwanyane that we're building a new society, and it's a society that will have us reimagine the relations within the society we're moving from. And this new society rests on 3 pillars: democratic governance, social justice, and fundamental human rights. And this should translate into improved lives of all citizens and free potential of every person. but it also gives us basic entitlements, the character of the state, structure of the state. And here we are in a winter of discontent, feeling that we have a great constitution, but experiencing dysphoria and a dystopic government among ourselves. But when it comes to the people, they see our constitution as a Potemkin constitution, glorious on the outside, empty on the inside. But here you are giving us hope that it really is not the constitution that is at fault, it's the implementation. And we are here to recommit yourselves, ourselves, and everyone to a new path. Well, the first political party to tell us how do we turn the situation around when it comes to coalitions is, we're calling them alphabetically. So the first one is the African National Congress. I'm not certain who's representing the party, but I see the Secretary General, the Honorable Mr. Figi Lembalula. Over to you, sir.
Amanda, you can say away to John, it's fine. Thank you very much, Prof, Program Director, the elders of our state, President Mutlante, the Deputy President of our country, Shipogoshe Paul Mashatile, fellow leaders of political parties. As the ANC, we also want to take the stage and wish Umdwana Kapinda Ngene a speedy recovery. The African National Congress takes the opportunity to welcome the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments. It is an important occasion to discuss and find sufficient consensus on measures that should be taken to address the intolerable degree and untenable situation of instability, disruption of governance, and service delivery in coalitions running our municipalities. It is our view as the ANC that legislative framework should be put in place to regulate coalition governments to safeguard democracy, sustainable development, governance, and service delivery. Having observed the disturbing developments in hung municipalities and metros, affected communities and citizens would have good reason to believe that collectively as political parties, we are only interested in power politics instead of addressing their needs. This dialogue should, through a sufficient degree of consensus, prove that we are truly and genuinely committed to stable, functional, developmental, and accountable government. We must therefore strive to come out of this dialogue with a framework that will lay a basis for new legislation. Such agreed framework must help restore our people's confidence in our constitutional democracy. Let me state from the onset that as the ANC, we are not here to talk about what should happen after 2024 elections. We are deeply concerned about the coalition chaos and instability in municipalities. This is what the regulatory framework should help to resolve. We are fully confident that 2024 will result in not us or anyone having outright majority to govern. Coalitions in their current free-floating institutional setup are not working for the people. They are not held together by any transparent safeguards and function as parley's maneuvers for back, wheeling and dealing. This makes them prone to collapse and, more worryingly, a tendency to disrupt the processes of governance for effective delivery of services to the people. In line with the Freedom Charter, the South African Democratic Movement continues to espouse the vision of a people-centered and people-driven participatory democracy in which the people shall govern. The people shall share in the country's wealth, the land shall be shared among those who work it, all shall enjoy equal human rights, etc., as some key defining features of our democracy. The health of our democracy should be measured by the well-being of citizens, as well as the stability and ability of democratic institutions to serve the people, even when there are changes after every 5-year electoral cycle. The principles that we are tabling as the African National Congress seek to remedy the instability, disruptions and dysfunctionality of coalition governments in our municipalities. There could be some who think that coalitions are a reflection of a maturing democracy, while others may think it is evidence of a failing democracy. On the contrary, we believe coalition governance is neither good nor intrinsically bad. It is their degree of effect on the functionality of governance systems in a given context that determines whether coalitions are good or bad. In democratic rationale, coalitions reflect split public opinion and a degree of political fragmentation where no party has been given a clear mandate to govern on its own. This is currently the case in 80 municipalities across the country. The chaos, instability, dysfunctionality, and collapse of service delivery in coalition municipalities has irked many patriots and citizens legitimately worry about their future under coalition governments. There is indisputable evidence and direct experience from citizens that since the advent of unregulated coalition governments in some of the major cities and towns, development and service delivery have moved in reverse. We have to arrest this negative development urgently and collectively. The African National Congress would like to put forward a set of measures and principles that must underpin the framework that can improve the functioning of hung councils and coalition government in our municipalities. We hereunder outline the set of measures and principles as follows. 1, coalitions must be based on a common minimum program, a citizens' charter that focuses on measurable targets to service delivery and development in the communities. Such a program must be made public and be subjected to discussions in community meetings. 2, coalition partners must commit to share values, stability, accountability, ethics and integrity, community participation, good governance, respect for the Constitution and the rule of law, social justice and equity, human dignity, non-racialism and non-sexism. 3, the party that has won the largest votes should lead the coalition in that municipality. An executive position should be allocated in proportion to the votes obtained by coalition partners. Coalition government should reflect the will of the people, not elite deal-making among parties. 4, a threshold should be introduced so that there is a degree of legitimacy with regard to what amount of electoral support qualifies a party or candidate to be part of councils and coalition governments. 5, the law should be amended to ensure that public administration is insulated from coalition deal-making and bargaining and that motions of no confidence are not abused. 6, Coalitions should be transparent and accountable to the people in their jurisdiction by giving quarterly reports and accounting to citizens on service delivery progress and milestone. 7, where no party has a clear majority, 50% plus 1, the executive committee system should be introduced by amending Section 12 notices. 8, there should be an independent dispute resolution mechanism established to deal with any disputes among coalition partners. 9, the formula for allocating PR seats in councils is profoundly undemocratic and should be amended to reflect the will of the people. It punishes the parties that have won more votes. In this regard, and in pursuant to these principles and conditions, the ANC committed itself to the following. The ANC will prioritize working with parties, community-based organizations and civil society formations that are genuinely committed to stability, social justice, and ending apartheid colonialism in all its forms. Those who are divisive should not be considered. The ANC will avoid entering into coalition for the sake of ganging up against other parties. This is neither sustainable nor desirable in a country that faces deep socio-economic problems and has a history of racial divisions. A coalition should be about healing our divisions, capable and ethical governance that takes forward the vision of fundamental socio-economic transformation that benefits all citizens, as espoused in the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of the Republic. As a general principle, societies are always forced to evolve political systems to reflect both their moral intentions about and experiences from their efforts at progressive social transformation. South African society is now called upon to reflect on the insights we are gaining out of the past 30 years of democratic experimentation for fundamental social transformation. This discussion on evolving a viable coalition framework for our local government authorities must be viewed as part of this evolution of our political system, and discussion must retain loyalty to the shared moral intention to build an effective developmental state at all levels. In conclusion, the ANC notes that there will always be ideological, policy and political differences among parties in our political landscape. However, in each municipality, we are prepared to work with parties that are genuinely committed to stabilize municipalities so that they can provide services and promote development in communities. We are also keen to explore grand coalitions in order to ensure stability, service delivery, and local development. We believe these principles and legislative measures will restore public confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can political parties please try and stay within 10 minutes? I don't have the skills of the Speaker of Parliament to just come and say, your time is up. So when I approach you, just know that I'm saying your time is up. But I also look in my direction once in a while and I'll show you when you have 2 minutes. I'm now going to call an honorable representative of the DA to come and state their views.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to take much of my time. As a former public protector says, we only have 10 minutes. Can I please ask that the presentation that I have prepared please be flighted so that we can go through it as quickly as possible. Good morning to the Deputy President, the former President Kgalema Motlanthe, Madam Speaker, our hosts, Premier Wendy, leaders of political parties, civil society, academics, and invited guests. As our democracy matures, so too must our political system. And as our democracy rids itself, as it seems, of one-party domination, we as lawmakers need to step up and insulate citizens from the shifting political sands. It is absolutely important that as leaders we remember that it is the public that we serve and not ourselves. It is the public that suffers when coalition governments are unstable and not focused on service delivery. As the official opposition, we take our role very seriously, and that's why for the past year we have been working very hard to come up with legislative proposals. We have looked at international best practice, and we have compiled some proposed solutions which we would like to present to you today. The DA proposals are as follows. We are looking at 3 pieces of legislation that we would like to introduce. And one of these pieces of legislation has already been introduced in Parliament and is before the Portfolio Committee of Justice. They are listed on the screen. And ultimately, we've tried to seek the inputs of political parties that are represented in Parliament, because we do believe that at some point there are things that do transcend political interests. And so I'd like to go to the next slide. The first bill that we are looking at, which is the one that's already been introduced in Parliament, is the one that seeks to amend the Constitution. It is our view that the abuse of motions of no confidence, as we've seen in local councils, in fact has created the instability. And we believe that while motions of no confidence are an important accountability mechanism, they can in effect create the instability that we've seen if they've been abused. And so what we are seeking to do at a national level is to limit the amount of motions of no confidence to once a year, but also create a safety mechanism of saying, however, there can be motions of no confidence more than once in a year's period if there has been law broken, or if there has been an independent panel that does look at whether or not this motion does stand. And the reason for that is because we don't want to rid people of the ability to be able to pass motions of no confidence, but we need to make sure that they are not frivolous and they are not abused. The next slide, please. The other piece of legislation which is coming to Parliament shortly, and so I was very pleased to hear the Secretary General of the ANC talking about their desire for legislative proposals too, because I do believe that we ought to work together as political parties that are represented in Parliament, is simply the same thing, which is to amend the Municipal Structures Act. And this one is about limiting the motions of no confidence in a mayor or a speaker. Again, the idea here is to make sure that we instill stability. And we would have the same safety mechanism that I spoke about in the previous piece of legislation that would say, unless there has a law been broken, unless the independent panel that has been put together by the council can say that there is legitimacy in this motion, there shouldn't be a situation where a mayor, a president, or a premier can pass a budget and not even deliver against it. Next slide, please. The third piece of legislation, which is also coming before Parliament, has 2 essentially objectives. The one is to extend the time it takes for a government to be formed. Currently, the law says we've got 14 days to put together a government, and our view is that this should be extended to 30 days. The reason for that is that in a scenario where there is coalition governments, you cannot really realistically put together a coalition government that is highly contentious in a really pressurized situation where you only have 2 weeks. We believe that this is a non-contentious introduction, and we think that it should enjoy multi-party support because it's really about the idea of extending the time it takes. We've seen internationally how long our German colleagues are here will tell you how long it took them to negotiate their coalition governments, and so these are not easy things, and so we can extend the time. What the bill also will seek to set an electoral threshold at a local council level. Our view is that the seat quotas, as we have seen them, are or at least require a political party to be able to put together one seat. And so that they are not just simply beneficiaries of votes that were not allocated. We're of the view that also this is important for representation, that you need to have the legitimacy of the people that have voted for you. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. Other key stable coalition government principles that we have come up with are electoral thresholds at a national and a provincial level. These are not in the 3 pieces of legislation that are coming before Parliament, but these are some of our proposals that we think are really, really important. The introduction of a political ombudsman, the publication and the registration of coalition agreements, and coalition agreements that may have legal standing. Next slide, please. Electoral thresholds are quite common around the world, and a lot of people may argue that they may defy the principle of representative democracy. And our view really is that the Constitution does provide for general representation, and having an electoral threshold would not be taking that away. And I've listed there a number of countries, both on the continent and around the world, that have instituted electoral thresholds. And we do believe that having political parties that have essentially a lot to lose will mean that they take their role in a coalition agreement quite seriously. Next slide, please. The idea of a political registrar is really borrowed from the Kenyan model of their political act of 2007, where they have a political registrar essentially, which is the administrative head of managing coalition governments. Because of course we understand that these are political agreements and by nature are contentious. But when you are able to take away the administrative management of coalition governments, actually the administering of the agreements, the publishing of the agreements, so that the public can hold you accountable to something that has been published, and not just gentlemen's agreements that are agreed to behind closed doors, but these transparent agreements. We are of the view that this could go a long way. Next slide, please. Our view is that all political parties that are represented in Parliament, and I say represented in Parliament, of course, because we would really like these 3 proposed bills that we've put before Parliament to be passed before the end of this term. Our view is that research is showing us that we are likely to see hung legislatures across provinces. We could potentially even see a hung national legislature. And it cannot be that as members of Parliament we are found flat-footed when it comes to lawmaking. We've got to catch up with the political system, and our country is showing us that we need to be ready. And so we are really using and imploring this platform this morning to say, we have come up with solutions, and a lawmaking process is a robust one. We may not agree on every single principle, but that's why there is such a long and really open process to engage the public, to engage one another in Parliament, so that we can panel beat some of these proposals and come up with solutions that are going to better serve South Africans. I think it's high time, and we can agree, all of us, that it has been the people of South Africa who have been on the losing end of some of our unstable coalition governments, and we cannot see that instability replicated at a provincial or a national level. And I really do hope that I can count on your support. And of course, we also are really interested in the inputs of academics, experts in this lawmaking process, so that we can come up with the best product possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Siviwe Kwahube. And I think that applause was also partly because you stuck to time. So thank you, ma'am. We are now going to have a representative from the EFF. Do we have somebody from the EFF? All right. We're going to jump in the absence of that because we don't have time. Honorable Sabisa, we need a representative from the IFP. Will it be you, sir? Okay, please take the podium.
Program Director, the Honorable Deputy President, the honored guest, I observe the protocol. Let me begin by saying, on behalf of the IFP and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, I want to convey our gratitude for the support the people of South Africa are giving to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi during this critical time in his life. Thank you, South Africa. Inkatha Freedom Party is the fourth largest political party in South Africa and was established by our founder and President Emeritus, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in 1975. Our party exists to serve and has done so faithfully for almost 50 years. As the IFP, we acknowledge that coalitions are here to stay. We have also witnessed the failure of coalition governments at local level for a variety of reasons. We are dedicated to the pursuit of functional coalition governments whether it will be at a local, provincial, or national level. And we are committed to doing the work needed to ensure that these governments are functional so that they can provide the services to our people. It is for this reason that the IFP has joined these discussions today, and that we will be meeting with fellow opposition parties later this month to further explore what is needed for coalition governments to succeed. Let me take just a minute here. In the interest of the people of South Africa, the IFP over the past 2 months have been engaged in advanced discussion in preparation for the National Convention to take place on 16 to 17 August at Kempton Park at Emperor's Palace to find alternatives to ensure that next year we are not caught unprepared, as an example of COJ. The IFP would like to state for the record that we are willing to work with any political party that shares our values and has the goal of improving the lives of the millions of South Africans that battle for survival daily due to poverty, inequality, and rampant unemployment. Further, the IFP makes the same pledge to further coalition partners as it does to our supporters. You can trust us. The IFP is a party committed to the values of servant leadership and good governance with a proven track record. We appreciate the work that has been done in preparation for this dialogue and have studied the discussion papers, which contain some valuable insight. However, we believe it is very ambitious to believe that the question of coalition governments can be discussed and resolved in a day and a half. Our point of departure should firstly be to define the different types of coalitions and to determine whether or not the coalition-making process needs to be defined. All those that have read the documents made available, as well as done their own research, will know that there are different schools of thoughts, either or written agreements between political parties. The IFP is willing to consider regulations if such will be of equal benefit to all parties involved, of benefit to the electorate, and in line with the Constitution. Based on our experiences and research thus far, the IFP believes the following 4 elements are essential for building strong coalition and is committed to each element. These elements are communication, consultation, consensus, and compromise. The communication element is threefold. Each party must keep the lines of communication open with their internal structures to build support and identify challenges and issues from party structures. Potential coalition partners must share information, communicate honestly, and agree on decision-making processes. The coalition must communicate with the public at large and highlight goals and accomplishments. We believe this national dialogue could be considered to form part of the communication element as various stakeholders are gathered to share information. The next step will be consultation. This is essential to the success of any coalition and provides a safe space for parties to try to understand the other's points of view. It also be used as an opportunity to establish conflict resolution processes. Consensus building is possibly the most time-consuming element to the process, as parties need to find common ground. In South Africa, there are many voices, but I'm certain that most opposition parties present here today will agree that they want to build a just and prosperous societies with opportunities for all. Parties with a people-first ethos will find much in common. Compromises will, however, always be needed. No two political parties are in 100% agreement. The goal should be to find middle ground where all involved are comfortable. In conclusion, Program Director, I want to remind all of us here today that we are called to serve the public, from those in the national government to our provincial government and the local government structures. There is no silver bullet to solve the coalition government issues. However, if we are all committed to set aside selfish ambitions and put the needs of people first, I believe we can find a way to make coalition governments work for people of South Africa. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Honorable Velonkosi Hlabisa, and I join you and everyone in wishing the Honorable Buthelezi a speedy recovery. The next speaker to address us is from the Freedom Front Plus, and I suspect it's going to be Dr. Groenewald? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, and as I say, all protocol reserved. Honorable Deputy President, I've listened carefully what you have said, and you actually concluded by saying that in the end, we want good governance with zero tolerance towards corruption. Now, Honorable Deputy President, maybe we should have a national dialogue on why we are here today where we are in South Africa when it comes to governments. But the topic for this dialogue is, of course, coalitions. I want to start by a remark and a quote from Professor Jaap de Visser, and I quote, "It is not possible to legislate political behavior or force political parties into stable coalitions. Much of such efforts would be unconstitutional anyhow." Close quote. And that is important, what we must remember. When we look at our Constitution, we say the Constitution introduced an overall proportional electoral regime, and proportionality favors coalition governments as it enhances multi-party representation. And that's what the Freedom Front Plus has always said. As our democracy matures, multi-party governments are becoming a reality. Political parties and the electorate is, however, inexperienced with regards to coalition governments. I always say that we are going through a learning curve in South Africa as far as coalitions are concerned. That includes the electorate as well as the politicians. What are the guiding principles of the Freedom Front Plus? The Freedom Front Plus agrees with the following principles: putting the people first, committed to combating poverty as well as building a growing and inclusive economy, contribute towards building a prosperous society and meaningful participation in the economy, committed to building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united and prosperous society. And we are committed to good governance with no tolerance for corruption. It seems the Deputy President took a quote or what I wanted to say today. The Freedom Front Plus disagrees that the party that has secured the largest number of votes should be the party to lead the coalition, and the executive positions should be allocated proportionally to the votes obtained by the coalition partners. And the reason we say that is this will not be conducive to the establishment of effective multi-party governments and will undermine the very fabric of the formation of coalitions. Much is said about electoral reform. From our side, we say an electoral system on its own accord cannot determine the workability, stability, accountability, principles and partners of coalition governments. No electoral system can do that. You don't have a fit for all or a perfect electoral system for each and every country. Most suitable systems should be determined in relation to the applicable requirements in the context of the circumstances of the country. Specifically in South Africa, we must look into our historical context, the promotion of reconciliation, broad representation, enhancing multi-party participation and representation, sustainable electoral processes, and ensuring representation of the diverse societies, to name a few. Electoral reform could easily be abused by a governing party who is losing power. Such reform could undermine true democracy. So we will have to look very carefully when we talk about electoral reform. When it comes to legislative reform, keep in mind the quote I gave of Professor de Visser. We in the Freedom Front say that an electoral threshold will undermine constitutional principles aimed at healing the divisions of the past and establishing a society based on democratic values in which the government is determined by the will of the people. A threshold will create divisions by excluding minority groups from having a voice in legislatures, and it will also exclude independent candidates from being elected. It will deter conventional political participation and so doing undermine the values enshrined in the Constitution. The Constitution should be amended to allow for at least 30 days between the declaration of the election results and the election of the President by the National Assembly. Such will allow for sufficient time for coalition negotiations and the conclusion of agreements. Legislation should obligate the publication of coalition agreements, and legislation should limit the tabling of motions of no confidence to 1 per annum. When it comes to local government, we talk about the Municipal Structures Act. We believe in 1 motion of no confidence in an office bearer per annum, and we also say that the current proportional composition of collective executive committees to allow for the formation of coalition governments and multi-party representation regardless of the applicable mayoral system. We also say that to avoid the intimidation and bribery of councillors, all votes on motions of no confidence and the elections of office bearers should be open, and no provision for secret ballots should be allowed. In conclusion, I want to say again, all legislative reforms in this regard should be based on values which will uphold a system of multi-party participation and should not suppress the principles of true democracy. I thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Peter Groenewald. Our next speaker is Mr. the Honorable Wayne Thring, MP, Deputy President of the ACDP. Over to you, sir. You have 10 minutes.
On behalf of our ACDP President, the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Meshwe, I wish to greet our Deputy President, former President Motlanthe, leaders of political parties, Western Cape Premier, and with all protocol observed, allow me to state that the African Christian Democratic Party is no stranger to coalition politics. From the early 2000s, the ACDP was one of the first political parties to enter into a coalition with the DA in the Western Cape, amongst other political parties. And we were instrumental in the drafting of the first coalition agreement documents, which are still in use, perhaps with some amendments. That coalition, however, did not go well for us. Perhaps if we had legislation in place then, the signatories to the agreement would have honored it for the full term. It must be made abundantly clear that the African Christian Democratic Party has always supported a constitutional democracy. We've asked ourselves, what type of democracy? We must ask ourselves, what type of democracy is envisioned and supported by our Constitution? Even an elementary read will confirm that our Constitution supports a multi-party democracy. Clearly then, if the Constitution supports a multi-party democracy, then this must be factored into any legislative amendments or coalition systems and agreements that are to be developed going forward. It must be made abundantly clear that the cause of the collapse of the majority of municipalities is not coalitions, but corruption, nepotism, and a flouting of the rule of law. The Auditor General's report will confirm that. The ACDP concurs with the Prevention Technology Transfer Center Network, PTTC, who state that there are 6 elements that support an effective coalition, namely, 1, goal-directedness. There must be a common goal or shared vision. 2, efficiency, which ensures a high work ethic to utilize resources to deliver services in a well-organized and effective manner. 3, opposition for participation. Members must be able to take on formal positions within the coalition that are tied to their expertise, abilities, and interests. 4, cohesion. This is synergistic collaboration which develops strong interpersonal relationships and increased commitment. 5, diverse stakeholders. Successful coalitions represents a diverse set of sectors representing a broader group of stakeholders in the community. And finally, new skills. As a coalition builds and enhances its functioning, the acquisition and fostering of new knowledge and skills amongst its members increases the effectiveness of the coalition in achieving its outcomes. Allow me to quote Dr. Pierre de Vos in the literary work Marriages of Inconvenience, where he states, "The South African Constitution does not contain specific provisions regulating the formation and functioning of coalition governments in the national, provincial, and local spheres of government. Neither does ordinary legislation contain such specific regulatory provisions. However, the Constitution establishes a hybrid version of the system of parliamentary government, which applies at the national, provincial, and, with slight variations, local government level. And the choice of this system has important consequences for how coalition governments are formed and how they operate. In this regard, it is the view of the ACDP that positive legislation, and I emphasize positive legislation, must be put in place without negating the principle of a multi-party democracy. The ACDP fully understands that coalitions are at a local government level are fractious and unstable, and as a result, some legislative amendments may be necessary. With regards to the professionalization of our civil service, motions of no confidence, and the time period given to elect senior executive members after an election, what the ACDP will not support is the minimum threshold of valid votes cast in order to qualify for a seat. We view this as counter to the spirit of our Constitution, which I alluded to earlier, hence unconstitutional and certainly undemocratic when read in terms with Section 152(1)(a) and (d) in particular. The minimum threshold proposal is, in our view, exclusive, and it uses a sledgehammer approach to a problem that can quite easily be solved by legislation which ties coalition members into their agreement for the full 5-year term of office. In conclusion, the ACDP asserts that all political parties must never forget why we exist, and that is to serve the people of South Africa. The ACDP understands servant leadership. In the last 2 municipalities where we are coalition partners, the ACDP has not demanded MMC positions, even though we could, or executive positions, because our priority is our citizens and effective service delivery. The moment we forget the reason why we exist as political parties is the moment we fail to become relevant to ordinary South Africans. The ACDP will not forget, and we refuse to fall into the category of irrelevance in the hearts and minds of South Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. That concludes this part, and then I hand over to a quintessential negotiator that all of you have known for many, many years, Bobby Gotso. Just in ending, though, to indicate that from this group, it's very clear that there's an agreement that coalitions have to be regulated, that they are currently dysfunctional, and they are undermining governance, service delivery, and the legitimacy of democratic institutions. There is an agreement that motions of no confidence must be restricted, that people should be put first, that the Constitution should be put first, and that these coalitions should curb corruption. But there's disagreement on the electoral thresholds and on proportional representation in executive positions. What is unclear, which has only been raised by the IFP, is the question of what kind of leadership do you need? And I think the IFP has said we need servant leadership. On principles, only one party has made it clear that it disagrees with the one principle, the one of thresholds. The other parties added more principles, and therefore the task going forward is to look at how do we consolidate these principles in line with the Constitution. And it's a privilege to hand over to this quintessential negotiator. Over to you, sir.
I think the professor has been very helpful in summarizing, I think, an extraordinary level of convergence in the presentations we've heard today. Mr. Deputy President, Mr. Former President, compatriots, I want to take just a brief moment on this important journey that we've started here at this, I think, very appropriate site, to remind us that in 1994, some 19.7 million South Africans stood in long lines waiting to cast their votes. I also want to remind us that they were voting under a set of rules from our interim constitution, as the rector reminded us, one that has got close links with the University of Western Cape. In that 1993 constitution, this provided that any party in the National Assembly that achieved 3.5% of the vote was guaranteed a seat in the cabinet. It also incidentally limited the cabinet to 27 people. That's in the interim constitution. And in that interim constitution, it guaranteed any party that got 80 seats, 80 out of 400, that's 20% of the vote, were entitled to an executive deputy president. Now, I don't think for a moment that many people of the 19.7 million were familiar with those provisions. It clearly, incidentally, was an interim constitution envisaging multi-party government. I think, however, in the millions of people who lined up to vote, there were two compelling beliefs. The one was a recognition, not complete perhaps, but nevertheless a recognition that South Africa was made up of different people, and that the country belonged to all of the people who lived in it, an acceptance in a deep way of diversity. And the second, I think, motivating spirit with that 19.7 million people was that to build a better life for all, the people of South Africa had to work together. That government of national unity set up in 1994 lasted for 2 years of an intended period of 5. And it's interesting to reflect on what we lost in that premature end to that. And so I think what the challenge is for today's conversation and the conversations that are happening later this month and will continue to happen is to return to that core set of values, that the country belongs to all who live in it, and that every citizen has a duty to work with his or her compatriots to build a good life for all. So that stable coalitions that serve people and extend dignity, prosperity, and freedom to all should be part of that, of recovering the dream of 1994. We now move to the second realm of diversity in our parliament, and I think the South African parliament must be one of the most diverse and interesting in terms of a diversity of political organization, a diversity of leadership, a diversity of vision. And so we move to our second set of presentations, and we start with the United Democratic Front. And I ask their presenter to come to the United Democratic Movement. That's an interesting piece of history.
Our program directors, former President Motlanthe, I think Mkhulwa, you are aware that in this house we are the only 2 former heads of state. Abanye basafunda nje. Deputy President, our appropriate introductions have been made, and I align myself with them. This event is a prime example showing that it is possible to bring key role players under one roof to discuss issues of national interest. Thus, it could also be to discuss the UDM's concept of an economic indaba or CODESA, and perhaps the head of government, if he was here, I don't know, but it could be done anytime soon, as this is the bone of contention, which, as we all know, that at CODESA we did not deal with the this thorny issue. We dealt with political freedom, thinking that economic freedom would follow. Alas, 29 years later, we are found wanting. As a result, the youth of today is uneasy about their future, and the situation is exacerbated by the exodus of both black and white youth, in particular professionals. Coming back to the topic of the day, South African voters have mandated different parties with their support, especially in the 2016 municipal elections, when it signaled the end of one-party dominance. A combination of parties in the opposition benches added their numbers and decided to push the party which ran the major metros in this country. We, however, saw the hostile reaction to that decision. We must be cautious in our current endeavors not to over-regulate our democracy and ensure that robust engagement pre- and post-elections remains at the order of the day. I have read some academic submissions and other material in preparation for this dialogue. And one thing that is still an Achilles heel to the entire process is public representatives and political parties' direct access to government resources. In other words, the hijacking by public representatives and political parties of accounting officers' powers remains a challenging setup. The second, corrupt political directives, these corrupt political directives are laced in many instances with corruption and must be done away with. And individuals and parties caught with their hands in the cookie jar must be expelled. In order to understand the damage, this dynamic, one needs to but read the Zondo Commission's findings. Who will ever forget Mr. Agrizi's testimony under oath as an illustration of this point? Regarding the seat thresholds, we must be careful to speak of this to not be seen as undermining the spirit of the Constitution that promotes multi-party democracy. Let each party express their opinion on the matter in their manifestos, and then the voters will have the last say. As we speak, many parties have registered with the intention to participate in the 2024 elections. How are we going to change midstream? We cannot use that as a yardstick to punish political parties in an untested theory that the current instability of local government is because of the proliferation of political parties. It is worrisome when this theory comes from the big parties. Although we are thankful to this initiative, the question is whether it has gone far enough. Why not look at the entire electoral system? For instance, something as simple as the appointment of some of the service providers of the IEC remains a state secret. Apart from the first round of appointment of electoral commissioners in 1994, the appointment of later commissioners has become a sticky issue. Those of us who served in the trenches, together with some of the current commissioners, know where their loyalty or party loyalties lie. In the same vein, many have questioned why members of the ruling party tripartite alliance are used as presiding officers. Another failure is that when the IDPs are conducted, certain expectations are created with the people and then no feedback is given. The professionalization and training of officials need attention as well. In conclusion, then, Mr. Deputy President, the demarcation boards needs to jack up its act. The willy-nilly chopping and changing of both rural and urban wards must stop. At local government level, we need to value the work of our sub-headmen in rural areas, that is body. Whilst councillors live far away from the people, sub-headmen tackle the day-to-day needs of rural South Africans, and they are asking for a cell phone allowance and a stipend. Any declaration which we come up after this dialogue must be as a result of consensus. It is unfortunate that for some of us who have been doing coalition benchmarking and research in different countries of the world, it came so late. It is a pity that this exercise was not completed earlier. Mbax, uthe unengxaki of the local government. Ayindimo oyicimileyo zawuthetha kodwa. Let me advise you, the Secretary of the ANC, Secretary General. How city a problem is at local government level currently, which we must focus on. Magasitinge el gama lithi senze coalition nezinye party ezinikezwe ivote kakhulu. Grand coalition. Yabo manje ngasebenza ne-DA kule phase until 2024. Nina abantu beninikwe numbers as more kunezinye parties. I can assure you, you will achieve stability with local government. You will also achieve, improve race relations kweli lizwe. Silawuli lizwe mfundisi. Sanuchitha ixesha nisebenzise small parties. Nifune xa ngokufailwa kublenywe i-small parties. Sebenzani noyi-2.
I hope we can fix the sound system. Our next presenter is from the ATM. See if the power has come back. So, could we have the next presentation from the ATM, please?
Thank you, Program Director. Dini bulisa nonke, Speaker, Deputy President. As we gather here today to engage in discussions about the future of our nation's governance, it is our strong belief as the ATM that the discussions about the future of our nation's governance must be based on principle, respect, and inclusiveness. Having listened to the ANC and the DA and read the documents for this afternoon's discussion, as the ATM, we stand before you with deep frustration at the common view amongst the biggest parties on why some coalition governments fail and their proposals to the effect, which are largely exclusive and sideline the so-called smaller parties. It is time we stop beating around the bush and address the glaring instabilities that have plagued our municipalities that are governed through a coalition. The blame for the instabilities in coalition governance cannot be placed on the so-called smaller parties. The real culprits for these disruptions have been the so-called bigger parties who have displayed a history of bullying coalition partners, enticing them with money and ultimately destabilizing their coalitions. The so-called smaller parties have, for the most part, maintained a record of stability with isolated incidents that should not overshadow their dedication to public service. Will not participate as the ATM in entrenching of a wrong perception that the failure of coalitions is a result of smaller parties. Will not allow such scapegoating, which is designed to influence the citizens against voting for the so-called smaller parties. To address these issues and promote stability in government, we need to advance the spirit of cooperation and putting the interest of the people ahead of the parties. The two biggest parties in this dialogue are foreign to that concept, hence them using the smaller parties as a scapegoat for their own self-centered politics. Additionally, the concept of imposing a threshold for participating in a coalition is nonsensical. The absence of a clear winner signifies voter dissent and indecision, calling for inclusive negotiations rather than exclusions. We must come together and work towards solutions that represent the diverse views of our nation. No one should seek power through the back door. If a party gets below 50%, they've lost the election, and the new government will be formed by a number of parties that have all lost the election. So to say that a party that has the most votes, even if they fall shy of the 50%, must be the ones to lead the coalition is ridiculous, to say the least. The Constitution allows for any member of parliament to be elected a president of the republic, whether they belong to a party with 1 seat or 300 seats, as long as a person is a member of parliament. These proposals of a threshold are a clear violation of Section 86 of the Constitution, and they are thus unconstitutional and are driven by a desperate attempt to hold on to power. The two biggest parties are afraid of the prospect of losing power and have gone as far as trying to undermine the Constitution in order to achieve their selfish desires. Anyway, this threshold proposal is not legally permissible without a constitutional amendment. And even to remotely suggest that we need to amend the Constitution so that the bigger parties can hold on to power is dangerous and must be rejected in the strongest of terms. Coalitions formed solely for expediency, without shared programs or ideological convergence, are bound to be plagued by internal conflict, rendering them ineffective. Let us not be fooled by mere declarations of cooperation between the top parties. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Instead, we must prioritize policy and ideological similarities to address pressing issues such as land, crime, the economy, and the establishment of the state bank. At this juncture, self-interest must be set aside as we prioritize the welfare of our people. We must forge a path that serves the greater good and ensures a prosperous future for all South Africans. Many of the proposals shared today by the so-called big parties have strayed away from constitutional principles. There is also the issue of several political parties undertaking a study tour on coalitions in Europe to learn about coalition governments. There are 14 parties in parliament. That study tour excluded most of the members or most of the parties that are in parliament. Now you want to use that document, which is exclusionary in nature, to influence a dialogue on coalitions here in South Africa. CATM asivumelani nalonto. while we can learn from experiences from elsewhere, it is crucial that we rely on, it is crucial not to rely on solutions tailored for different contexts. We need to create a unique and tailored solutions that considers our nation's specific circumstances. We are not Europeans, and our realities are not European. Any solution for stability in coalition must be based on the principle and inclusiveness. The truth is the so-called bigger parties have already concluded on a grand coalition for 2024 and want us now to legitimize the process which is meant to pave the way for that national grand coalition next year. It is of course premature to discuss 2024 coalition partners, yet this process is crafted to legitimize a plan to form a government by the two biggest parties next year, even though they do not agree on many policies, which is something that will be a recipe for disaster for the average South African. Elections are about a mandate. No party here has received a mandate for 2024. Why should we bust our heads 9 months before the elections when you should wait for a mandate first? Some parties after 2024 think they will be big parties, whereas they will not be big parties. As that was not bad enough, the DA went on to say we need to limit the votes of no confidence that should be called. What democratic system is that? Calling for a vote of no confidence is a constitutional right which is enshrined in Section 102 of the Constitution. Parties cannot be sidelined from forming a coalition government, then told they will not have a way to hold that government accountable if it goes astray. Now parties are being stripped of the opportunity to utilize the right to call for a vote of no confidence, a right that the main opposition utilized several times in the previous parliament. As a final thought, it is also disheartening that there are parties that are sidelined for this dialogue, despite some of them being former members of the National Assembly. Yet parties that have not even contested a single election have been invited. What informed this decision? This sort of bias sends us backwards. It is unnecessary and does not assist in paving a principled way forward. As the ATM, we emphatically reject this dialogue. We are an elected party. We are not in parliament by the invitation of anyone. What we've been asked to do here today, it is to legitimize the process that takes away governance from the Constitution. This gathering undermines and excludes indigenous faith groups, parties in parliament. Therefore, as the ATM, based on this submission, asingeni lento yale dialogue. Thank you.
Can we please move to the next presentation from the Good Party?
Good afternoon, Honorable Deputy President, former President, Madam Speaker, all colleagues, all protocol observed. Elections is a contestation of ideas, in case we don't remember. The right to vote for a political party of your choice is enshrined in the Constitution. And while some of us see the absence of a clear majority in the legislature or the council as an obstacle to ascent to power, and thus a nuisance, as good we see this as a legitimate outcome of the voters exercising their choice. We're trying to interfere with choice. Political parties are required to compete as equals on a fair and free playing field for the choice of the voter. The voter makes their choices, and in return they expect to see and hear their representatives reflecting the ideas that earn them that support. They expect their choice to be represented by those that they have elected. I want to remind you about the 1998 judgment of De Lille versus the Speaker in the Western Cape High Court, where the court articulated the concept of representation. The court remarked, the electorate who voted for that party are entitled to be represented in the assembly by their proportional number of representatives. Section 46(1)(d) of the Constitution also prescribes that our electoral system will result in general proportional representation. The fact that the old parties are fragmenting and that there is a birth of young political parties, who of course start smaller, is a legitimate development of a democratic society protected by the Constitution. A national dialogue on coalitions must embrace that our constitutional democracy gives voters an abundance of choice when it comes to their political rights. Any dialogue that seeks to limit that choice undermines the foundation on which our democracy was built in the first place. I want all of us today to remember Tata Nelson Mandela, Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe, Steve Bantu Biko. Remember, they fought for this democracy and died for it. There are some parties in this room who have enjoyed the right to vote for many years. But since 1994, we all have the fundamental right to vote in this country. Strengthening our democracy, the outcomes of this national dialogue and everything that follows must protect the political rights of the citizens, and we must not be seduced into creating comfort and convenience for old political parties. Amongst the founding provisions of the Constitution in Section 1D, it says, the guarantee of a multi-party system of democratic government to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness. As the Good Party, we support 5 of the principles as in the discussion document, Deputy President. We support 5, but we don't support number 6. Some of the proposals contained in the discussion document do not strengthen or open our democracy where every voter's choice is counting. On the contrary, that proposal seeks to shut down and reduce the democratic space for contestation. A dialogue on coalitions should happen without in any way trampling on the rights of citizens to choose to support the party of their choice. In fact, when you introduce thresholds, research has shown that this leads to wasted votes. So we should stay within the constitutional provisions that provide for proportional representation. When citizens exercise their political rights to start a political party as contained in Section 19 of the Bill of Rights, we must be encouraged that our democracy is alive and well. New parties and independents must be welcomed with fresh ideas to strengthen our democracy. It is our legal and democratic duty to protect those rights and not to collude with each other to constrain those rights. We're watching. Thresholds. Our proportional representation system, like OPL systems, has a natural de facto threshold which arises out of proportionality and mathematically. The natural thresholds give full expression to the founding constitutional provision of multi-party democracy. The proposal of threshold goes against many constitutional rights and must be rejected with the contempt that it deserves. It infringes on the rights of citizens to start a political party. Let me go on. Oh, you're here. Sorry. Let me just conclude. You are forced to form a coalition when no party receives 50% plus one of the vote. Because the legislation requires that you must govern and pass budgets and IDP with a majority. And for the most part, listening to the lessons from around the world, coalitions work when there is maturity and trust. As good, we support coalitions. We are part of coalitions, and our experience informed us that respect for your partners is key. Arrogance, hypocrisy, baskap mentality of some political parties is the greatest threat to stable coalitions. We will never allow any of the old parties to bully us into submission to accept thresholds. I thank you.
Can we please have the presenter from the NFP, please?
Thank you, Program Director. Allow me at the very outset, all protocol observed, allow me to congratulate our former Public Protector on your achievement, and thank you for making South Africa proud. I want to start off with a quote by our former President Nelson Mandela when he said, "Democracy is not a spectacular sport. It requires the active participation of all the people to flourish." Having said that, Deputy President, the marginalization of smaller parties should not and must not be considered. But let me start off by saying the question that we should be asking ourselves, why do we enter into coalition governments? Let's assume that we entered into coalition governments to serve the people of this country. Then the question is, why is it collapsing every other day? So certainly it means that we're not entering into coalition governments to serve the interest of ordinary people in the country. Well, I'll tell you why coalition governments are not working. And I've said this time and time again. Parties that are entering into coalition governments are only entering into coalition governments on the positions for power, for control, and most importantly for financial resources. I can assure you, bags and bags of cash change hands because people are obsessed with power. It's not about serving the interests of ordinary South Africans. And it is for that reason you will find political parties that will be in a coalition agreement and next month they're moving to another political party. It's only because more money has been handed over there. Now, when we compare ourselves with other countries, we must be very mindful of the fact that the circumstances and the dynamics of politics in South Africa is different. In fact, in this country, we are obsessed with power to such an extent that our main focus is to remove others, rather than work together with the common interest of finding solutions in the interest of the country. We want to attack and replace each other. Now that, for me, does not augur well in terms of taking South Africa forward. Now, I want to say one more thing here. Unless, and I'm going to repeat, unless we separate politics from administration. Now, I don't want anybody to say me that in theory that's what it is. I know it is. In practice, unless you separate politics from administration, coalition governments will not work. Because the emphasis is on the cookie jar, and that is about financial resources. So what we suggest you should be doing, and what we all should be doing, is ensure that no politician in this country has anything to do with any appointments, whether it's local, provincial, or national government. Have an independent body like we found out in Ireland when we went recently. Let an independent body be responsible for human resource. Right now the requirement is you must be a good singer and dancer if you want to be appointed. And that is why our municipalities are in the state that they are. That's the first thing, an independent body that will appoint people that have got the expertise and the capacity to be able to do that. Secondly, no politician should have anything to do with procurement. Procurement must be done absolutely independent of politicians. And if politicians cannot get the hands of tenders, there'll be no infighting, coalitions won't collapse. If they know from day one that you're not going to be able to get your hands on the finances, I can assure you most of them won't want to work with each other. That is what the situation is. I hope am I running out? 10 minutes already, just it's not much. But the National Freedom Party will support amendments. However, we are not satisfied with the threshold you're talking about. We don't believe it's in the interest of democracy. And like I've just quoted our former President Nelson Mandela when he said, all of us, this country belongs to all who live in it. We all should be able to have equal opportunities. But I also want to thank the Speaker for the first time that all parties had equal time. Normally we get a lot less than we get. First time in history they gave us 10 minutes, all of them. But very importantly, we think that unless we can come together in the interest of this country and put our differences aside, we are not going to go forward. I've run out of time, but I've got a whole lot more to talk about. But lastly, I want to say your coalition governments, why they are not working, I said already because of finances and monies and corruption. But it's also leading to assassination. That's how obsessed we are with power, that we will even assassinate other members just to get that power and control. So unless we address those root causes, we won't be able to be successful with coalitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we have the spokesperson for the AIC, please?
Good afternoon, program directors. Good afternoon to the Deputy President of the country. Good afternoon to our previous mayor, Paul Parkstow, leaders of political parties, and the AIC delegation led by Stephen Jafta. As the AIC, we do believe that coalition government is here to stay. But we have coalition government under this heading, reasoning a durable coalition government framework. There are at least 4 themes that this presentation is anchored on: the nature of coalition governments in South Africa, the history as well as power sharing arrangements, overarching challenges rocking coalition governments in South Africa. Is a system of collective executive committee at the local sphere of government a panacea to sound coalition politics? Can coalition pacts have a different variation at the provincial and national levels under a new legislative regime? So, first question, what is the history of coalition governments? Coalition agreements and power sharing arrangements are not inherently identical. This is so because coalitions are born of hung legislative bodies, while power sharing arrangements through their very existence from fraught political processes which by and large have no bearing to electoral outcomes. The 1994 Government of National Unity, for instance, was a compromise consisting of the ANC, the IFP, and the National Party. Whilst this was not a coalition pact, it was a power-sharing arrangement, which was to oversee the adoption of the new constitution and herald a new future for South Africa. Despite not being a coalition agreement, it did signal a paradigm shift in South Africa's political system of governance. The only similarity between the two outfits is their bargaining chip. For example, the National Party withdrew from the government of national unity, was predicated on its limited ability to direct government. Despite its marginal electoral support, the National Assembly had inflated its importance. The phenomenon would later rear its head in South African coalition politics decades later, where political parties are more known for power jostling than providing quality services to the poor. It was during the coalition with an IFP government headed by the late Premier Lionel Mtshali as Premier, comprised of the ANC's, MECs including Dumisani Makaya and Michael Mayibuya Kulu. From 1994 to 2004, there was not even a single no-confidence vote moved against the Premier of KZN under that coalition. Was this partly because the ANC and the IFP had a pre-election coalition agreement in KZN? Was it because the ANC could not muscle out the IFP because other two fringe parties in the KZN legislature had a combined 10% electoral support, not enough to assist the ANC to form a government? Or was it because of the values these parties held? With these speculations, we are led to believe that a variation of these factors could have played a role. Number two, what have been the challenges riven in coalition governments post-2021? It bears repetition that the national democratic elections in 1994, culminating in an inclusive and democratic South Africa, the milestone was amplified by the amalgamation of 800 local authorities. For the record, about 800 segregated local authorities were amalgamated into 300 new local government structures. While this had no real effect on the governance of municipalities, there was a raging concern among many commentators about the role of coalition politics, especially following the success of the 2004 70-year coalition of the Cape Town city. Despite this success, there's nothing to write about home. Coalition governments at the local sphere of government have largely been personal egos and less about the passing of bylaws, the approval of budgets, the imposition of rates and taxes, and the raising of loans to bolster municipality liquidity. The track record of these governments is actually shocking. In Nelson Mandela Bay, the DA coalition with smaller parties collapsed in August 2018. It was replaced by an ANC coalition with the UDM. By December 2020, this coalition had collapsed and was replaced by yet another DA coalition government. In the city of Johannesburg, the city has had its 8th mayor in over just 2 years. By any standard, this is abnormal. The chopping and changing of executive mayors has spillage on service delivery and governance. Executive committee members are swapped willy-nilly. In turn, this erodes institutional memory, accountability, and the values of responsiveness. Before you know it, accountability negating tools have been blunted as the goalpost keeps moving. For instance, that in coalition-led cities like the city of Tshwane and city of Johannesburg, the quality of living has dissipated and lawlessness has been entrenched. The other challenges resulting from informal coalitions to undermine the will of the people by parachuting small margin parties as mayors effectively render them as puppet mayors. Principally, this taints the entire electoral process and stares down the wishes of the electorate. Number three, as the argument goes, a 5% threshold will curtail the number of political parties who contest elections. thereby averting disorganized coalition governments. The claim is not backed by evidence-based facts. It is not small political parties who are at the center of poor coalition governments, but the dominant political parties' predisposition to power jostling. If this threshold is allowed, it will potentially erode the fundamental value of multi-party system of democracy, which was designed to ensure accountability, openness, and responsiveness. In any event, the South African electoral system must result in a system which is of a proportional nature. I thank you. I can see you on my...
Thank you. I'm just trying quite hard to preserve a reasonable lunch break because we've got a long day ahead of us. So if we could move to the COPE presentation, please. Good.
Our Program Director, Deputy President, former President, Mr. Lekota has given me the privilege to address on behalf of Congress of the People. I greet all of you, compatriots and leaders. Listening to the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Mbalula, he sped through a whole lot of principles. And as I listened carefully, I think we in COPE would be able to agree with many of those principles. And we would be able actually also to discuss a lot of the issues that were raised by the Freedom Front. We could agree with what they were saying also. Program Director, we have a document which we would like to share. And if you give us the mechanism, we will do so. Our emphasis is on two aspects. One, dealing with local government. The circumstances and the situation prevailing there are very different from those that prevail for provincial and national government. So, Deputy President, we have separated the two in our document. And we would like some opportunity to talk further at some point on the local government, where we can actually embellish a lot of what is in the document. But coming now to the question of the provincial and national government, we would like to emphasize that there are two types of coalitions. The most popular is the post-election formation of coalitions, and that is where most of the problems emanate. Our preference is for the pre-election coalition arrangement. Now let me explain why that is so important. In terms of Section 86.1 of our Constitution, the election of the President by the National Assembly is one of the first items on the agenda for the new government. Now let's imagine that there is no pre-election agreement and the haggling carries on for a month or 2 months and there's no possibility of any party putting forward a candidate who can be a president. The Deputy President indicated that our situation in South Africa is rather very complex. There are sociological issues. We've listed many of these. For example, land restitution. If we're going to try and form a coalition after the elections, and the National Assembly is unable to function for a prolonged period of time, it's going to then once again negate the whole prospect of the coalition finding acceptance from the people of the land. So what we have done in our presentation is spent a lot of time thinking about what problems are likely to arise if we leave the formation of the coalition to a period after the elections have been fought. We believe that many of these things should be cleared beforehand so that there's a sufficient consensus that will prevail. We also believe, and I think a number of speakers before me spoke about legitimacy, that if we want to make someone who's going to be the president of the country, but that person comes out from nowhere and then is elected as president by the coalition that is formed, what will happen then is that the question of legitimacy will come into serious question. So I think what we will do, I will leave it at this point by saying to the program director that we have all the ideas put on paper. If you indicate to us where we can email, we will do so. Thank you very much for listening.
You don't need to use email. There's a secretariat here who will be very happy to distribute your presentation and indeed all the others. We are 2 presentations away from lunch. I just want to encourage people's tummies, actually. So if we could have the presentation from the PAC.
Former President of the country, the Deputy President, facilitators of the sessions, MPs, and respectively my Vice Chancellor, Prof. Tyrone Pretorius. My name is Azani Akyali. I am the spokesperson of the PAC. Mine is going to be precise and be short. But where I want to state, this is the position of the PAC on coalitions. We probably need to start with the fact that our benchmarking was done with our colonizers. It also is reflective of how much we are obsessed with benchmarking with our colonizers and to seek for solutions. We are for totalitarian power of the state. This arrangement is an administrative chaos. That is what coalitions have proven. But we must equally make mention of the fact that we love that the ANC does at this current moment in time feel that there are power shifts in South Africa. But furthermore, we must also stress that we strongly agree with the thesis that the sole purpose of coalitions in this country are precisely on service delivery, as we believe that this is an ideological issue. At the center of service delivery are ideological questions. What then becomes key priority of issues of government are not outside of the ideological question. There are some amongst us here who see bright streets, light, and toilets in townships as service delivery without questioning the very existence of township as an unethical existence, first of place. Here we are gathered because there seems to be a very seamless and effective implementation of racist and anti-black bylaws. Therefore, for the PAC, the ideological question in forming coalition must not be undermined. It is precisely this undermining of the ideological question that has given rise to power-hungry organizations who are willing to go to bed with anyone that is going to give them power in the state. We further saw that beyond administration issues was the issue of trust between organizations, And as stated earlier, these all emanate from our different ideological frameworks. The most time is consumed trying to sort political differences and to build trust, which on its own does derail our progress in resolving our irreconcilable historical differences and where we find ourselves as a country. On principle, coalitions are marriages of convenience and very much unprincipled at that. The common denominator should then, in this case, be the interests first of black people, and here we even have right-wingers who want to chant governance charter. We must be very careful in bringing back apartheid apologists through backdoor. On the position of threshold, as the PAC, we are vehemently opposed to the proposal of the threshold. It is a lie to say that there is no threshold in the South African electoral system. If there was no threshold, then everyone who runs for election would be represented in legislatures and council. The Constitution requires proportional representation, and we must take this imperative very serious into its spirit. Our government needs and must be a true reflection of the different views that are representative of our society. This proposal equally would be very disadvantageous to independent candidates who in principle should be catered for in discussions around coalition. In coalition in South Africa must not be forced down our throats. The people in this country, the problem with this country, I'm sorry for that, is that we are not resolution orientated. We also, in that, still find ourselves with these irreconcilable historical differences. Equally, the political flip-flopping within South Africa leads us to where we find ourselves currently. It is also equally important, since we are gathered at an institution of higher learning, perhaps what we should implore and need to think of, it is how do we have think tanks who are intellectuals, who are going to take this country to our envisaged society. By think tanks, I refer to people that are going to work towards our legal and legislative framework in addressing coalitions. It cannot be that even today, that amongst ourselves, it is old people that are gathered here, and amongst our political organization, there is lullness of young people, which on its own, it is a problem. It is also equally must be noted that previously, South Africa did have what I would term as some sort of a coalition. This was with the government of national unity. But again, we do see that at the helm and at the epicenter of everything, it is our ideological differences that at the center of, we forget that it must be the people that must be serviced. It must be the interest of our people that are at the center. And at the end of the day, we still need to address the issue of land, because all of these problems of service delivery, there are issues that emanate from the dispossession, the displacement, and the landlessness of black people. You've seen in the Western Cape precisely yesterday that with the bylaws and with the DA present, that a number of people had to walk from plantation in the wee hours of the morning. With that being said, I thank you. Izwelethu.
Our last presentation is from Jama-ah.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know why the leader of Parliament Business is worried about coalitions, as the parties making up the liberation movement contesting elections will get our 50% plus one. There will not be a return to white rule and apartheid or secession for a 55th state of Africa. What was the narrative in the trenches we see in the city of Joburg, where Jama-ah is part of the leadership of 9 political parties, an example of a very stable coalition. Don't believe the media. I acknowledge the presence of Maulana Yunus Patel of our ulama bodies, who gave the definition of a Sharia marriage for my private member's bill, a definition accepted by Cabinet as we move forward with amendment to the divorce bill. This is an example of a small party not making the threshold that the former public protector feels is a consensus in this House. Small parties without thresholds have made a difference, and besides getting Cabinet to accept that definition after 30 years, we also assist with running the city of Johannesburg. I want to remind the men in this dialogue of the directive of the Leader of Parliament Business, our Deputy President and Deputy President of the ANC, that they have breakfast with their kids every morning. He said that in Parliament. Jama-ah agrees with this, but not the law to govern coalition government in South Africa. The reason is found in section 1D of the Constitution, which the Honorable Dalil so beautifully explained, which says a multi-party system of democratic government to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness is key. A stable coalition is not a constitutional principle. I don't know where you get that. It is this document, the Constitution, that even the Premier, who wants another state in the Western Cape, urged us to guide us. But let me acknowledge the presence of His Worship Alderman Kabelo Kwamanda, my Executive Mayor, and Advocate Shamima Sali, my National Spokesperson under media attack. I am in your corner. It is not a small party causing instability, it is like the general. He says he's a former statesman. We only had one statesman, and that was apartheid statesman. The general says that the instability is brought about by the DA, the ANC, and Action SA. I agree with the general. My topic for this national dialogue is the revolutionary call for one man, one vote. Jama-ah supports the ANC position of a citizens' charter because the ANC is becoming Jama-ah light. But we put on the table a different process. Jama-ah will propose the following changes to the electoral system of municipal government. Mayors should not be elected by members of municipal councils. When a mayor is elected by members of the council, then the mayor holds her position or his position. Maybe I must stick to her. It's better to have only female mayors. Then the mayor holds her position for as long as she can retain a majority in that council. That can be for a very short period of time, especially when there is fluidity in the political allegiances. Mayors should be elected by voters in the municipality for a term of office. A round of applause, please. That will ensure that the mayor's tenure is not directly affected by political party instability in the municipal council itself. Jama-ah understands that some political parties will not like the idea of directly elected mayors because a directly elected mayor will be directly accountable to the voters of a municipality with less accountability to the political party bosses. But a mature democracy, which Honorable Dalil speaks about, expects of political party bosses to act in the best interest of the country and not in the best interest of their parties. If we want to see stable coalitions, then the instability of political party allegiance cannot continue to dominate who is and who is not a political office bearer. This question of who governs should be given to the voters to settle through an election. Such electoral choices will bring the stability that everyone is called for. In South Africa's second report on the implementation of the African peer review mechanism of January 2009, former President Jacob Zuma's message was, and we also wish him a return to good health, we have also since the dawn of freedom and democracy striven to build a state that unites all the people of our country in diversity. The DA wants to exclude the Muslim community in Jama-ah. In a briefing in its third quarter performance, the Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration, Dr. Alex Mahapa, Deputy Director General, described APRM's primary purpose was to foster the adoption of policies, standards, practices that leads to, amongst others, political stability. He further describes South Africa as a country with a participatory approach. The DA, and I'm worried the ANC does not like this party approach business. I don't know what business they like, leader of business in Parliament. The Bill of Rights provides principles which issues of diversity can be conceptualized, and that is what we need to strive for. Jama-ah takes the view that political instability, which the largest parties fear, is coupled with the fact that South Africa is maturing as a multi-party democracy. When the South African Constitution was adopted, the people of this country accepted that one of the constitutional principles, the foundational principle enshrined in Section 1D, like we said, is a multi-party system of democratic government. We heard Minister De Lille speak about the case that she won. We also know very recently the Constitutional Court stated that individuals can become members of Parliament. So how can you have a threshold for a political party and you also then don't have a threshold for a person standing as an independent candidate? Must be threshold be half a person? I don't know. However, the question to be asked is whether a threshold will strengthen or weaken the constitutional principle of a multi-system of democratic government. Will such a threshold result in more or less parties from being elected to legislatures and therefore participating in a multi-party system of democratic government? If a threshold results therein that only the large parties get elected and endless numbers of minorities who vote for and participate through local and smaller parties are excluded from being represented. I see you hungry, Professor Gottschall. I'm not going to deny you to sit at the table, but I want to state quite clearly that moving towards thresholds, and I didn't have time to speak about the stupid idea of limiting motions. I don't know how intelligent people that operate in councils can think like this. I haven't had a chance to speak like that, but like the previous speaker, we'd like to make that submission. I just want to say that this framework for coalition government is the first step to extra parliamentary resistance in South Africa, and that must avoid. Thank you very much.
I'm very pleased to tell you that it is lunchtime, and lunch will be in the marquee, and you exit through this exit and then turn to the left. And so we'll see you back very promptly at 3 o'clock. Thanks. Thank you.